Yeah, so going back to those early childhood stages, before we were ever capable of actually logically thinking about what we were being told and how we were being taught about life, we were being programmed with expectations, with things are supposed to be this way, things are supposed to be that way,
Yeah.
things should be, I should be this way, I should be that way. And we've got all of these kinds of idealistic expectations about life and about ourselves that were kind of programmed into us. This kind of fantasy vision about, well, if everything was working perfectly, then these are all of the things. And so we should always be striving for those. And and so we're a lot of times in this unconscious process of constantly criticizing and judging everything by a set of norms that were essentially created in our minds as infants before we were ever capable of really analyzing the truth and the wisdom of those things, and being able uh, to accept that, no, it's okay for things to not match up with this fantasy vision. And in fact, the fantasy vision is just that, it's not reality. And when we start making that shift, then the question becomes, okay, what kind of reality do we want to create? Not what's the fantasy vision that we're trying to attain, but
Mhm.
what's the reality that we're wanting to co-create, in fact, with the people that we're involved with.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think that's definitely, that's not, one of the first steps, right? Redefining your entire reality. But you know what? It is, it is that final goal, right? When you start putting all the pieces together. I mean, I think that's, think that kind of answers our question. What is happiness? Well, it depends on how you want to define it, right?
To a
Uh,
great degree.
Yeah. So, when we're building this reality or reframing, everything that we've worked on, we have to redefine it from a place of strength, right? We need to, find that core value within ourselves that we want to hold on to, and then, that being our cornerstone, build
Yeah.
off of it, and
Yes.
kind of expand out, and redefine that world how we want to. I mean, I feel like, even though I can't really relate to it, right? I often think of like that process of coming out for folks in the LGBTQ community. You're
Hmm.
stripping down all these preconceived notions of what everybody had about you, and you're
Yes.
redefining your identity. And man, that sounds like such a terrifying process. I mean,
Hmm.
just like shredding yourself down to the core of who you are and then rebuilding.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the good fortune to work with a lot of people who identify within the LGBTQ plus community. And one of the things that I have found is how much more self aware and insightful they are than most people realize.
Yeah.
And it's because their experience of society in general, I don't want to say that this is always the case. Let's not stereotype them even in positive ways, right?
Right.
But in general, their experience of society has forced them into a level of self awareness and self examination that a lot of people never have to experience.
Yeah, because and I mean, primarily if you're looking at, like folks within the LGBT community, and just being faced with, higher rates of trauma, higher rates of, you know, of rejection,
Mm-hmm.
You look at, like, we were talking about security as well, right? Higher rates of homelessness, higher rates of prostitution. All these different factors, because they chose to accept this facet of their identity. And you look at that, and it really kind of I don't want to say exposes the hypocrisy of society, right? But it
Mm,
exposes the hypocrisy of putting those values in values you don't believe in, because you hold faith in these values that you were born with. But the moment you want to be more sincere with yourself, those identities can abandon you.
mm. It's true. It is true. Um, you know, there's a kind of tribalism that runs deep in human nature, and uh, and even our closest loved ones can abandon us when we realize we can no longer identify with whatever tribe it is that they want us to be part of. And I think everybody has heard stories of parents who have really been cruel and cold and and even violent towards their offspring who have come out.
Mhm.
And that's a pretty serious. That's a pretty serious level of programming when a person reacts to their own loved ones from the position of the tribe rather than from a position of compassion and love between two individuals. That's shocking.
And yeah, but right there you hit the head on nail. The only thing that's going to break down that tribalism is compassion, is love. So I know it's hard to redefine that trauma, to want you to be closer to those people that abuse you, to want to understand and empathize with them more. It's just not the way humans are wired, unfortunately.
Right.
We tend to be wired from this more primal place, but I guess that's the goal, right? We work on ourselves in the hope that others are doing the same thing, so society or humanity in general evolves to that next level, and
Yeah.
undoes the damage.
Yeah. You know, that kind of touches on something you were saying earlier that stimulated a thought in me. Um, I'm going to use my own words for this philosophy that you were kind of espousing, but my own words are, everybody's actually doing the best they can all the time. And I'll tell you kind of the first place where that first started to occur to me. The the first words that got that line of thinking started for me was when I was a kid. I was very active in church. I grew up in a church family. We lived right next door to the church. My parents were leaders in the church, and then all of the kids became leaders. Um, but it's that moment when Jesus is on the cross. And man, he has been through living hell, right? He's
Yeah.
been flayed, he's been beaten, he's hanging on the cross, he's been stabbed. And there are these words that he says that just are, still an incredibly touching moment for me when he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Here he is, he has been horribly abused by practically everybody. His own people have turned against him or abandoned him. The Romans certainly don't. He's nothing more than a piece of meat as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
And and his words about all of them is forgive them, for they just don't really get it. They don't know. They don't really understand what they're doing here. And that is just so. I think that's it. I think every time we do something that is hurtful and harmful, uh, it's done from a place of ignorance. And so we cannot help but be doing the best we can as our awareness waxes from moment to moment, as our appreciation of all the factors and the complexity of any situation comes and goes, that our knowledge of what's really going on, who we really are, who the other people around us involved in the situation really are, that knowledge is what determines whether we're acting in a way that is conducive to a loving, caring, positive, happy world. And of course, just like we said early on in this conversation, we're not incredibly smart creatures. We're just, I mean, maybe compared to some others, we are, but we can certainly see the limits of our intelligence.
Yeah, and I know, I was raised, similar background, right? Uncle was a minister in the Lutheran church, so we, I kind of, had a similar experience to where, it was later on, and when I started getting in the more, apocryphic texts, right? I was reading
Yeah.
the Apocalypse of Saint Peter, and it just all kind of clicked for me at the end when, no matter how gruesome a person it is, everyone goes to heaven after it's all done, right?
Mm,
There's
mm,
ultimate forgiveness. Doesn't matter if you're Adolf Hitler, doesn't matter if you're Jack the Ripper, right? Inevitably you are forgiven for the flawed creature that you are, and you still get to experience paradise, because at that point all the pain and sadness that you had caused, even the victims that you put that through, with that spiritual revelation, they're going to see you as that exact same flawed creature, and they're going to have that ultimate compassion on you. And it's that high level of, the potentials of what humanity could be if you really, followed the new law of love.
yes. Yeah. So well said. And I think, to get back to contemplative practice, I think that this is one of the great things. A lot of people are attracted to contemplative practice, mystical pursuits, Gnostic pursuits, because they want that illumination, that moment of knowing the absolute truth, the fundamental reality of all things. And what happens time and time and time again for uh, the people that history tells us who have attained that is that they come out of it and say, really, it's all about love, folks.
Yeah.
It's all about love. And so I think that's one of the most important reasons for contemplative practice is is to sink deeper and deeper and deeper into our humanity until we actually discover that root of ours in infinite love. And that when that happens, then all of this stuff stops being just theoretical.
Yeah.
Love, it stops just being poetry, this talk that we have about love. And you start to increasingly realize that it is the most real thing of all.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to, what we were talking about earlier with, finding compassion, right? I feel like no matter who you are, that root value that we had talked about, that base value that you
Cornerstone.
identify, that cornerstone is always going to be love, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how you want to define it, romantic, platonic. I mean, that sense of love encompasses that entire hierarchy of needs, right? It gives
Yes.
you your security, it gives you your acceptance. I mean, everything can fall under that blanket term of love.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, in Plato's dialogues, there's this wonderful time when Socrates there is talking about how his teacher Diotima taught him about this ascension of love that begins with just our physical attraction to beautiful things, right? We want them because they're beautiful. We have an instinctive desire for and attraction to that which is beautiful, because beauty is one of the fundamental qualities of God, of the absolute truth, right? And so that natural attraction and desire for the beautiful is that most basic level of love. And then Socrates recounts how Diotima tells him about these increasing levels of loving and appreciating our existence. And that finally, what we can come to is a direct encounter with beauty itself, that through love, we can come into direct connection with beauty. And we realize that what we're, this is not Diotima's language now, this is my language, that what
Yeah.
we have been loving all along is love itself.
Yeah, it's what we're longing for, right? It's that thing that we never think that we deserve to have, though we want it so bad. And, I feel like, we were talking about, stripping away yourself and then rebuilding your identity or your perception of the world around one key concept. You need to strip yourself down and rebuild it around love. Because one of my personal mantras that has helped with that negative self talk is that one of the ways I'll reframe it is my mantra is I am the river from which infinite love flows. And even if you're in the most
Mm,
destitute state of mind, if you repeat that enough, it will change your cognizant or your consciousness in the moment. It will
yes.
change how you're trying to perceive with things, because you're just reinforcing that core value that everybody wants to experience.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so I have a similar thing. Mine is not as poetic as yours. Um, I have just a simple question. And for me, as a guy who's often in his head and in his heart about things, I'm kind of by nature an introvert, it seems, and don't automatically think about, like behavior and my impact on the world and so on. That's not my first line of thinking about things. So the thing that I use is just the question, what's the most loving thing to do? In any moment, that question has value. No matter where I am, what I'm doing, that question has value. And the more demanding the situation is, the more value that question has.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's a great way to reframe it, as well as, reinforce the value that we should be focusing on. Um, yeah, that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that with me.